So, welcome back. This is our first video of 7th grade. We're going to talk about adding with integers with the same sign. That's adding positive and negative whole numbers that are both positive or both negative. In future videos, we'll talk about adding numbers with different signs or subtracting. Okay, but in this first video, we're just focusing on adding two numbers that have the same sign. And it's pretty simple if you really just think about it. But first, we're going to start by modeling it with counters, modeling it with a number line, and then we'll summarize it into a pretty easy rule that you can follow. So we're going to take a look just at a first example. And this is coming straight out of your notes. Hopefully you have the notes. We're going to add 2 plus 4. And we're going to show using counters. So we take our first number 2 and we lay out our two positive counters like we have right here. Okay, and then we're adding 4 positive counters. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. We add them in there. So we want to just count now how many we have in total, because when we're adding, all we're doing is combining two numbers. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 counters. Now I know that you know that 2 plus 4 is 6. But the reason why we model this is because it works a similar way. So in total we have 6 positive counters and our answer is 6. But it works the same way with negative numbers. Let's take a look at an example of that. So we have a different example here. And in this example, instead of adding 2 positive numbers, we are adding 2 negative numbers. We do negative 4 plus negative 3. The reason why that negative 3 is in parentheses is because it can start to look really confusing with a plus sign and a negative sign, both so close together. You get a subtraction sign, it's a subtraction sign next to a negative sign. It can be very confusing, so I like to put my numbers in parentheses. It separates them. I know that's a negative 3 and not subtracting 3. Okay, we do model this the exact same way we would model with positive counters. Okay, so we have negative 4 is what we're going to start with. So I've drawn here 4 negative counters. Okay, and then we want to add or combine 3 more negative counters. So we draw in 3 more negative counters there. And then since we're adding, we're combining, we want to find the total number of counters we have now. And if you count them out, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. I know it's red on red, but 5, 6, 7. Kind of hard to see, but there are 7 negative counters, 7 red counters. So in total we have 7 counters. Since they're all negative, that means my answer is negative 7. It's very simple. Okay? If you add 2 numbers that are positive, you get a positive answer. If you add 2 numbers that are negative, you get a negative answer. So we can kind of condense this down into a rule that says when you're adding with the same sign, when adding integers with the same sign, you must add the absolute values, so the positive versions of those numbers, and then we keep, running out of room here, I keep the sign. So if they're both positive, my answer is positive. If they're both negative, my answer is negative. Okay, very simple. I also just want to show you, just to see it, what that would look like on a number line. So let's take a look at a couple examples adding with a number line. So we have an example here where we are adding 2 negative numbers, negative 1 plus negative 3. The procedure for adding using a number line is the same. Okay, the first number, which in this case is negative 1, is where we start. So we plot our point. The point is already plotted for me, but it's down there on negative 1. That's where we start. The second number tells me how many spaces I'm going to go to the right or to the left. If I'm adding a positive number, I move to the right. If I'm adding a negative number, I move to the left. In this case, I'm adding a negative 3. So that means I want to go 3 spaces to the left because of the negative. You see me skip 3 spaces, I end up at negative 4. Where you end up is your answer. So when I hop back to 3 spaces, I end up at negative 4. that means that -1 plus -3 is -4. Okay, that's important because you may see down the line where they may ask you to model the equation using a number line. They may give you number lines and say which equation is modeled. And you got to be able to kind of connect the problem to the correct number line. Okay, just know the first number is where you start on your number line. The second number tells you how many times to skip and in what direction to go. And where you end up is your answer. Okay, that doesn't change our rule, though, for adding numbers with the same sign. You add the absolute values. So in this case, I add 1 and 3 is 4. And I keep whatever sign they both have. They both have a negative, so my answer is -4. Let's take a minute and just kind of wrap up what we went over. So we can kind of summarize this with a couple different examples. So the first one says add -7 plus -6. First thing I want to do, add the absolute values. So I just add 7 plus 6, which is 13. So I want to write my 13. I want to keep the sign of whatever both numbers share. They are both negative, so that means my answer is a -13. I add a negative and a negative, I get a larger negative number. It just makes sense. If you owe someone $7, you borrow 6 more, you now owe them more than you did before. Okay, second example, -11 plus -4. Same type of example, 2 negative numbers. I add 11 plus 4 because that's the absolute value of both numbers, and that is 15. I keep the sign of both numbers. Since they're both negative, my answer will be negative, and my answer is -15. So if you follow the rule, adding numbers with the same sign is very easy. Both numbers are negative. You add them, keep the negative sign, and just like we have for years before, if you have 2 positive numbers, your answer should be positive. Okay. Hopefully you have the notes to go along with it. If not, you can click the link to my Teacher Pay Teacher store. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment, ask me, do whatever you have to do.